It's Wednesday, September the 14th. Lake levels 9, 11 and a half, about 4.5 feet below summer pool. And water temperature, it's pretty hot for this time of year. I mean, it was 77, 78 degrees this morning, get up to about 81 when I got off the water. But, I think fishing's pretty tough for the most part. I've been all over the lake, and it seems like this time of year, it's all about the bait fish, wherever the shad are. Before I get into the fishing, I just wanted to remind everybody the CTO benefit tournament is this Saturday out of the Kimberling Inn. I think it's $150 entry, $1,500 guaranteed first place, $500 big bass. But it's to benefit kids. Hopefully, if we get enough boats to participate, we'll get to send a couple kids to a fishing and hunting camp for a week. So if you got nothing to do this weekend, come out to Kimberling City Saturday morning, and you can go to our website, Table Rock Lake Fishing, and get any of the information that you need on the tournament. But as far as the fishing, I've been from one end of the lake to the next. And also a couple weeks ago, I mentioned if anybody had some suggestions on anything they wanted me to talk about. Well, I got several responses, and I appreciate it. So after my fishing report today, I'm going to do a little deal on how to rig up a drop shot, size line, and everything I use. And then next week, I had a couple of people that had a bunch of questions about night fishing, and I haven't night fished in 25 years, but I've got a buddy that's a real avid night fisherman, so I'm going to try to get him on with me next week to talk about night fishing. But as far as the fishing, the drop shot bite has been pretty good up till about 10 o'clock or so, and it seems like a lot of the fish are out on main lake gravel points. Sometimes they're out over deeper trees. The key depth seems to be about 25, 35 feet. And I have found I fished night crawlers a couple days this week, and they bite night crawlers a whole lot better than they do plastic worms. But other than that, you'll see I got rods out all over the place. I catch a few fish on a football jig. There's no consistency to them, and they're anywhere from 20 feet deep out to as deep as 40. I hear there's been a pretty good, like a whopper plopper bite, and I've been throwing a Spro Cyclone Junior and a big whopper plopper. I know you can throw these things all day and not hardly get a bite, because I've done it a couple days. But, I say that, and one of my clients today caught a largemouth that weighed 4.9 in the middle of the afternoon. So I think if a guy's going to throw the whopper plopper or the Cyclone Junior or buzzbait, you just need to commit to it and throw it all day. I wish I could tell you what type of banks you need to be fishing it on or what part of the creeks. I've covered from the backs of the creeks to the mouths, and it's just, I'm having trouble getting a consistent bite on it. But like I say, my most consistent deal has been drop shot. When I can't get anything else to work, I can go out there deep. And like I say, the key depth seems to be about 35 feet. A lot of times you might be in 50 foot, but I'm only fishing about 25, 30 feet down. And when I get into the drop shot deal, I'm going to show you and tell you how I know exactly, where I'm at. But been a little bit of a shaky head bite around some of the docks. It seems like 10 to 20 foot deep, and there again, you might fish it for an hour or two and get 1 or 2 bites. Like I say, overall, and to me, September and October can be some of the toughest fishing because the fish change so much. They can be from 2 foot to 50 foot. There's still a pretty good thermocline in the lake, but I think when it breaks up, it's going to scatter the fish even more. But, as far as my drop shot rig, I usually like to throw them on a medium light, like anywhere from a 6'9" to a 7-foot rod. And I usually have got them rigged up with 2 different types of line. Now, I like mono over fluorocarbon because to me the fluorocarbon has so much memory. The mono doesn't have near the memory that the fluorocarbon does. Now, if you're a pro fisherman, you can get by with fluorocarbon because you're keeping an eye on everything all the time. A lot of times with the fluorocarbon, if you're not paying attention, you'll get memory loops, and it'll get under your reel and behind it. So that's why I like the mono. The mono does have a little bit more stretch, and the Mono I usually either use 6 or 8 pound, and I use a Sunline natural monofilament. I've used a little bit of everything. I find that the Sunline, a little bit smaller diameter per line size than other brands of line. I've just had really good success with it. And I usually use clear line on my mono. And the reason being, if I'm gonna fish, you know, I wanna keep my lure in 25 or 30 feet, I keep just a black Sharpie. And you know, you don't have to have all the fancy electronics. Basically, I can drop it down on my Garmin, either on my live scope or my 2D, and see where the lure is. But if you don't have that good of electronics, just take the boat out to where it's about 25 feet, drop it down on the bottom, then take this Sharpie and make a black line on there about 2 feet. And if you let that dry for a second, that'll pretty much stay on there all day. So whether you're out fishing in 25 or you're out fishing in 50 or 75, you know exactly where your lure is to drop down to 25. And if you start seeing the fish a little deeper, you can put the black mark at the end of the rod tip, which will get you at 30. So that just makes it a lot easier instead of counting your lure down. Now, the other drop shot rig I use, and I'll get into the hook here in just a minute too, but the same style rod. This is a 610, you know, medium light rod. It's actually a loose drop shot rod. This other one was a halo rod, which I've had real good luck with. But on this rod setup, I use braided line, and I use a 12 pound Sun braided line. Now you got 0 stretch and 0 memory with the braid, and then I tie on about an 8 foot, and now here I will use fluorocarbon leader or a monofilament, but about an 8 or 10 foot leader, and usually 6 to 8 pound. The good thing about it, like I say, it has 0 memory. I can fish with it all day without having to retie. Now I still do tie it the same way. You know, I'll tie like a Palomar knot, and the hook I usually use 95% of the time is a 1/0 Gamakatsu drop shot hook. Now the other hook, I will use sometimes too if I'm fishing a lot of brush piles and getting hung up quite a bit. Gamakatsu makes a little finesse hook, and it's got a little keeper right up here to hold your worm, and I'll Texas rig it to keep from getting stuck in the brush. But most of the time when I'm in the open water, I like an open hook instead of the Texas rig. And usually use about 16 inches of leader from the hook down to the weight. Now sometimes on my rigs that I've got straight monofilament, I will tie a little swivel up about 18 inches from the hook just to help keep some of the twist out of the line. Now there's several different ways I'll hook the worm. Most of the time I just kind of feed them on. You can just nose hook them like that, or the way we fish a night crawler when we're guiding, we take and rig them wacky style. You can rig it wacky style like that as well. Now I'll use several different types of worms. This here is a chomper's worm, plum. This one here is an O'Malley. It's from the new Big Bite Sensation line. Let's see, this is a KVD Dream Shot. I like the Morning Dawn and the plum colors seem to work real well. This is a Big Bite Cliffhanger. You know, and a lot of times too, most of the time we're down there around shad trying to imitate shad, and this is a cute little deal that Megabass makes, just about the size of the shad the fish are spitting up. But for some reason, the little worms seem to work better for me than a shad style bait. Another hook that you can also use is the same size hook. It's got this is a Gamakatsu. It's got a swivel built into it where you tie your main line on here, and then you take your tag line and it just snaps in here. Take about 16 inches of line and you snap on your weight. Now the weights, had some of them set out here somewhere. But most of the time, I just use a round weight or teardrop. 90% of the time I use a 3/16 or 1/4 ounce weight. Now there's a lot of different ways to fish a drop shot. The way I'm specifically talking about right now is targeting suspended fish and fish that are right off the bottom. A lot of times in the springtime, especially, you know, when the moss gets real bad on the bottom, you get slimed up, I'll take and fish like a French fry or even a Ned worm on a drop shot and keep it up off the bottom. When I'm doing that, I'll use one of those cylinder weights. I find it gets hung up a little less in the rocks. Also, I think the cylinder weights are a little bit better if you're fishing in the real thick brush. But 90% of the time, I mean, I really mix up my weights. The little round ones, or this is I'm trying to think, this is a bullet weights. But I use a little bit of everything for the weights. And I haven't, you know, the only time I find one that's a little bit different is when I'm dragging it on the bottom, almost like a Carolina rig. Because all it is, it's just like an upside down Carolina rig. So, and you fish it just like a Carolina rig. But instead of the bait being on the bottom, the weight's on the bottom, and you know, your bait's up a little bit. But, you know, a lot of times with our electronics, we're actually casting the drop shot to individual fish, like on the forward-facing sonar. It's really a pretty versatile bait. Bridge pylons are also a really good place to throw it. You can either vertical fish it, or you can set the boat away from the pylon, cast up to it, just kind of let it pendleton down, you know, keeping a tight line. And most of the time, the bite on a drop shot, it's a really light bite. Most of the time, we call it a pressure bite. Once you get your bait down at the depth, usually what I do, about every 15-20 seconds, I'll just raise the rod up about a foot or so, just so that I know exactly what the weight of the rig feels like. A lot of times you're going to lift up and it's going to feel like you've picked up a leaf. It's going to be a little heavier. What you want to do is just set the hook and reel. These are super sharp hooks. You don't have to do a killer hook set. Another way is you'll be sitting there fishing it, and if you're fishing suspended fish, if all of a sudden your line goes slack, you want to reel the slack up real quick and jerk, because one of two things has happened. You've either hit the top of a tree, or more than likely what's happened, a fish has come up underneath the bait and swam up a little bit, you know, creating a little slack in your line. So if you see a little slack in the line, hit it. If you're dropping down to your black mark and it doesn't go down, same thing. You'd either hit a treetop or a cover, or a fish hit it before it get down to your desired depth. So it's really a pretty versatile rig. You can fish it, you know, 12 months of the year, different worms, different type bait. So if you get a chance, play around with it a little bit. So until next week, good luck, good fishing.